I'm very happy to say this is your hat trick of soundtracking appearances.
It is. It's my third.
Oh, yeah.
Walk the Line. Which is the other one we did?
Indie.
We did Indie, yes. But I did. Because it's not. I think of your show as in that basement studio.
Yeah.
So I
but
feel
we
like
did the first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
That to me. Then doing it here. Well, anyway, the magic will occur between us.
We're here to talk about your magical film. I mean, I said to you after I watched it, I found it so emotional, and I think that's the thing with all your films is there's such a beating emotional heart to the characters, the story.
Thank you.
That we see. And I heard you say that about Dylan, about him being like an old friend that you need to kind of reacquaint yourself with.
Yes. I mean, it's like I feel like this is true for so many with an artist like that. You have your periods where it goes on the playlist and you're listening all the time and then you kind of move on. But with Dylan, you keep coming back. And that's probably been 5 or 6 times in my life. I've kind of listened to new stuff, and then kind of gone back, or had his new stuff come in. You know? My first, I heard the kind of classics on my dad's, cassette machine in his VW bus when I was young. But and he had the records, but it was really my first self-actuated exposure was Infidels, the Mark Knopfler record, the great record. What is that, like 82? 83? Yeah. And that I had on my Sony Professional Walkman as I walked to and from school all day.
It's amazing how those pivotal moments in life, those kind of seminal moments, I should say, where they kind of, something almost kind of gets under your skin.
Yeah.
Whether that just be as someone who enjoys music, but for you, that he clearly got under your skin, and as someone who's been there and kind of almost fighting out for you to tell a story about this man. And what was it about this particular period of him that you were kind of drawn to what it would allow you to do?
Well, it's actually the dawning. It's, in a way, it's the birth of Bob Dylan in the sense that on the first day of the movie is the first day he's ever been Bob Dylan. He was Robert Zimmerman before that.
Yeah.
And, there was a choice that I made with Jay Cox to just start the movie cold on this arrival. There is no setting up of where he's come from or who he is. In a sense, we let him explain that, sometimes falsely, and just discover who he is in the process of the characters, the other characters in the movie, discovering this wondrous, strange, unique human.
Well, I like that because that kind of that idea that you're almost understanding him from other people's observations and people around him.
Well, in a way, I mean, I never pictured that Dylan was going to be a character who would be prone to kind of self-confessions of pure feeling.
Yeah.
Except in music. That's partly why there's so much music in the movie. I feel like, at least if you look at it the way I do, these are portals into him. And so, I understand the observation oft made that he is enigmatic or mysterious and evasive and reclusive. Reclusive is definitely true, but they're all true to an extent. But I do question this characterization of him as being enigmatic when he's written over 55 records.
Yeah.
So many other artists have been much more secretive about their own feelings and never written a thing that they've sung. So it seems to me that Dylan has organized his life in a way that the music is the portal of self-expression and self-declaration, not the interviews.
Yeah.
Not the explaining. We've become a culture of having to explain art. I mean, it always makes me sad in some way, being the son of 2 painters, when I go to, the Tate or the MoMA and everyone's listening on headphones and staring at paintings as a narrator of some sort of podcast tells them what's good or important about the painting.
How you should feel about this painting.
Yeah, or why it's significant, and of course that has its value, but the complete dependence upon that and the fact that many don't ever just look. or listen. And they need someone to frame context so much for them that I think they miss out sometimes on what the artist was really making, which was partly a question mark, not an answer. And by providing answers to art, we essentially we disempower it, because part of the drama of all art is kind of the fragility of the message, and do we know it or do we have it? And in our current culture, we're so, I kind of think of it as our litigious nature. We need the contractuality of language to make solid what we don't trust our own perception or feeling about something. We want someone to confirm it in language. And I'm just like, listen to the music.
Yeah.
Just listen.
And allow yourself to also, it's that idea that, you might feel one way about a piece of music one day. It might change the next day. That's the beauty of it.
It completely opens up. It suddenly becomes something else. I mean, it certainly happened to me with Dylan's music. In the act of writing and organizing the narrative, you have to take these songs that you've known as artistic objects on a record, and now you're arranging them in a timeline in relation to history, both cultural history, political history, but also personal history. Who's he with? Where is he living? What's going on? Is he making money right now? Is he successful? Is he struggling? Is he feeling? And suddenly all these songs have a greater resonance, a different resonance, just because of where they are in his life, and where you're finding them in the trajectory of his life.
I'm going to talk more specifically about music in a second, but with Dylan himself, he said, "Come on over," to you,
Yes, I never dared in a way say I want a meeting, but what happened was that I had taken the script in investing in the supporting characters, Pete, Joan, Sylvie. I had kind of broken a kind of precept that the project was created under, which was that it was going to be strictly about the music from the point of view of the Dylan camp, and I kind of just ignored that rule, and certainly had his management team a little nervous. And then COVID hit. And so that was right at the top of 2020. And when it hit, this argument about the script became kind of moot, because the whole world was suddenly on pause. And somewhere in that silence, I think about a month later, I got a call from Jeff Rosen, his manager, who said, well, Bob Dylan asked to read the script, and he likes it, and he'd like to sit down with you. And so that whole tension from his management team kind of evaporated. Wow. And then what proceeded was just a series of meetings with him in which we just rambled and rolled through having conversations like this, where it would just kind of go where it goes. Yeah. All the way to our last couple meetings, where we really, in a granular way, went through the script and little things that he just I never sang this verse of Masters of War, it's what's written in the books, but maybe I sang it twice, but I always did it without, and I was like, good, because it's too long right now. So the meeting, I knew I couldn't sustain. One of the tricks was Bob's music. A lot of these songs are 5-6 minute in length. Yeah. And there's no way I could do them all. And you, honestly, in a movie, you have really 3 choices. Play the whole song, play the beginning, get out in the middle, or come in the middle and get to the end. And playing the whole song of a 6-minute song is not possible. And so it was great that he could advise me about what he's dropped, and who called him Bobby, and who called him Bob, and who got on his nerves, and how he felt. Yeah. Instead of just the facts and the bullet points, because what seems so important to me within the context of the movie, it may even be disappointing to some, is that I don't believe the characters knew they were making history. Mm-hmm. They were just making music and living their lives.
That it's coming from the right place.
Yes, and we assign history in retroactively looking back, and I don't think that's wrong, but I do think the movie tries to give you this window into what it's like when history happens and the participants don't know it. And it may be Joan Baez and and Bob in their underwear sitting on the edge of a bed singing Blowing in the Wind together, they know it's good, but they don't know where it's going. And the innocence of that,
Yeah.
and the wonder of how things emerge and how things grow is so much more moving when you see them at this moment of innocence.
Well, I think that's what's one of the many things that's so brilliant about the film is we have music in different stages. So there are moments in the film where you have these fully formed songs. You have these moments where they're being written in their underwear on the bed sort of thing. You have these duets happening. You have studio sessions happening.
It's all over the place. I mean, you have, Girl from the North Country first as a kind of half-written, half-played, hesitant ditty, at Pete Seeger's cabin, and then as a fully fledged song with Joan in Monterey. It's really, and my goal was to make them, as we talk about things, what language does inevitably that movies don't do is it separates. So we talk about the songs, and then we talk about the scenes, but the songs are part of the scenes.
Yeah.
And so I go to great effort even to take the vernacular, the language we use as we're making the movie, and not allow the discussion to be about a musical number versus a dramatic piece. That the songs are the scenes. The songs are dialogue with melody.
Yeah.
And that it sounds maybe fruity, but the point is that you're trying to avoid both stilted qualities of the biopic and the musical biopic, but you're also trying to do what they were doing, which is that watching these things get the drama of them being born.
Yeah, and it's those choices of, I don't know how you came around to deciding on what songs you would feature, not just of Dylan's, but of, your other players in the film as well, whether it be...
Sometimes it was just a matter of what would open strong, in some cases, Timmy made the choices, like he really wanted to do Fixin' to Die. That was one of the songs Bob laid down at Columbia. He also loved All Over You in Riverside Church.
Yeah.
He sings. As he was exploring the music, and as my partner, I was letting him kind of try and figure it out. And you're also trying to change it up, And what was important to me was, Fixin' to Die. You wanted him to have, that's not an original, that's a kind of classic folk redo, a cover. And that was also the statement, we were making. Musically speaking, it's really hard, without overly framing it in the movie, but one thing to understand is, at that moment in the early 60s, almost all popular music, but certainly folk, was covers. The idea of the singer-songwriter of the original tune, of it didn't exist so much, whether it was anything from Johnny Mathis to Frank Sinatra to Dean Martin to Barbra Streisand to even Miles Davis is playing, Coltrane, they're doing, Rodgers and Hammerstein. Everyone's playing things that exist, and then riffing on it in one way or another. So Joan's repertoire was almost entirely covers. Pete's repertoire, he wrote a few original songs. Most everything were covers. So the revolution that Dylan quietly led was when it finally became undeniable in the folk community that his original music was of the same weight and caliber as the stuff they had been doing and covering, which was a real resistance, this idea that nothing we could come up with now could compare to, in a sense, these totemic texts of the past. That Dylan managed to create things that demanded to be played now, and that changed the way the record company viewed him, which didn't begin to think of him at the beginning as of his greatest strength. Meaning they booked him, but his greatest strength as a songwriter was kind of overlooked when he was signed at the most preeminent label in music.
Yeah.
And I guess anywhere where I'm getting is there's a quiet revolution that happens in the movie, which is the sudden advent of original song. And it's happening at the same time in rock and roll, that suddenly people are writing new music. And it's not coming from the Brill Building, and it's not a cover of an old blues tune. It is our song. And that expression we take for granted now. But it hadn't existed before.
Well, Sylvie says that line in the film, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Kind of like those songs had to start somewhere. They
Right.
had to come
It's a
from
very
somewhere.
good point.
Yeah.
And in a way, we were kind of locking out new voices.
Yeah.
And the second that Dylan in part lifted that barrier, it was like a watershed of new voices and new outlooks and new poetry.
And that scene in the studio where I don't know, he's one of the guys at the desk where he goes, "Who wrote this?" And he's like, he did. Yeah, it's great. And I love, there's some lovely moments as well. You know, that idea that he always wanted to be in a band. You know, you think about the people that he cites at the very start of the movie, whether it be Buddy Holly or the Beatles or Elvis Presley, you know, they all had bands behind them. And when you see him in those moments in the film where he's you can see him not seeking out that band, but where he's in the Irish bar.
Oh, one of my favorite shots in the movie is this shot where Johnny Cash is getting introduced at Newport in 1964, and as Boyd Holbrook kind of walks, the camera pans and lands on Bob, and you just see like a picket fence, the four members of the band cross through frame, and him looking with such utter delight and envy at the camaraderie, at the kind of the brotherhood striding onto the stage.
And even the way he responds to when the Hammond comes in, and that little moment, and it's almost
he
like
likes it.
a little spark, and he's kind of like, it makes him taller.
Yes, and it was, for me, and I think for Timmy, it was, the goal was that that was the moment we were going to see real joy in him again. You know, I think you see glimpses, but that at play with the band in the studio was there's a playfulness and a joy that Timothy lets loose in the character in those scenes that makes you understand how lonely he must have been prior to that.
When he appears with the harmonica.
Yeah, bopping up in the back. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, because another thing that I really liked, you said you've been fascinated by, you know, art making people, but how there's a real loneliness in talent, or there can be a real loneliness.
Well, certainly.
And you get that sense in the film until that moment where he then has the band, and they have this.
No, he's been kind of alone. I mean, there's a little bit of, obviously, he makes a kind of alliance with Pete Seeger. He makes an alliance with Joan Baez, but they're not band members. They're kind of fellow icons. And and there's always, and with different agendas, not bad agendas, just different agendas. Pete's agenda, as played so beautifully by Edward Norton in the movie, Pete Seeger's agenda is less selfish, or less narcissistic, or less about being an artist himself than about being a leader of a movement and lifting the whole form. In a way, Pete Seeger is more of an organizer than he is he's a wonderful entertainer and a great stage presence, but he too had only written a handful of songs.
Yeah.
And he was mostly a kind of advocate for the music itself. Woody Guthrie was a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
And I think that's the connection that Guthrie and Dylan make, is that they are one and the same, whereas Guthrie's lieutenant in Pete Seeger is not the same kind of person as Guthrie. Wonderful, but different.
Well, I love how he almost bookends the film. You know, that the introduction and then the kind of almost farewell, and the only way they communicate is through music, whether it be.
They don't say a thing.
They don't say a thing, but through, you know,
just looking at each
playing
other.
to him, but then also that track that you choose to play at the end, Dusty Old Dust.
Well, it was the first musical choice I made when I started writing, because I realized the movie is about goodbyes, is about transitions, and it plays at the beginning because Bob has said goodbye to someplace we don't know to arrive here in New York, and it plays at the end because Bob is saying goodbye to the world we've come to know, and I love obviously the song was written about the Dust Bowl, but it has a kind of resonance that speaks to all that. When I sat with Dylan, one of the charming things he said about the script is he was like, I like how it begins and ends with Woody. And he said, you know, and it's got to work because it's like a sandwich with bread on both sides. He said, it doesn't even matter what's in the middle. and I was like, you know, it's just those moments where you go, you just love his way of looking at the world. Yeah.
That scene with Dylan and Woody at the end, and just the space you give it, and the time you give Timmy to really just kind of. And there's no dialogue, but
Nothing.
it's so just that the hand on the head, and it's so emotional.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah, and it's a kind of, I think there is an extreme honor, and amid all the other stuff, there is a kind of romanticism and honor to Bob, and he has such profound admiration for Guthrie, and it's way beyond everything else in the movie for him, and it's a kind of, it's his own idolatry, it's his own adoration. But it is wordless, because in many ways Dylan is wordless. He speaks in song, but he doesn't. I didn't write a lot of dialogue for Timmy in this movie. It's and when he does speak, it's kind of you enter the voice of Dylan, and it's 5 syllables, 4 words. Kind of try and keep it simple.
Yeah, there's. Another important, Monica's amazing as Joan in the film. You mentioned Edward, but I think Elle is absolutely beautiful as Sylvie, and that's a really interesting and
really
important
interesting
relationship.
Role, and so magnificent what she made from it. On the surface, an actress could look at that role and go, I don't get a guitar, I don't get a song,
It's more important.
Yeah, but she, first of all, she's a magnificent actress, and we're friends, and I felt like in one way she just joined on because we're mates, but she grew the role into something so 3-dimensional and so clearly, and she inspired me to keep writing the role, because I suddenly knew I had someone who could do anything, and but she's our ambassador. She's the only, let's say, non-eccentric personality in the movie. Everyone else is pretty complicated and has their own pretty aggressive agenda, whether it's Pete kind of running the industry and the fiefdom that is folk music, kind of he's a mayor of sorts, and Joan, who is the reigning star, who in some ways gets overtaken by Bob.
Yeah.
But is also completely fascinated with Bob as this song machine that is something she can't do.
Yeah.
Although he's also a kind of sloppier and less perfect executor of music, which she is incredibly on pitch and on time, and kind of plays elaborate finger picking, and is a kind of different kind of musician. Each one of these people, but Sylvie is just loves Bob before he's even much of a Bob yet.
Yeah.
And the connection is intimate, and you feel that, and you also feel, I felt, and it was something I felt in spending time with Dylan, I felt that her exit from the movie is the end of normal life for him.
Yeah.
It isn't just the end of that relationship, it's the end of anything resembling kind of conventional. Everything else will be in the context and the shadow of his intense stardom.
There's a scene which tells me so much about her strength of character, and it's when they're having the Chinese meal, and she takes the bill and pays the bill, and then she holds the door open for him as he leaves the restaurant, and I was like, what a woman. I love her.
I love her.
Yeah.
And she's just talking about, and the next scene she's talking on about what she's doing and what she's studying, and no, I mean, I effectively want the audience to fall in love with her.
Yeah, well, they do. We do.
And I love that Timmy is kind of such a difficult date. And
we've all had those.
Yes, but they're twice as intriguing. What I feel is, Elle's playing this beautiful girl who's charming and full of life and full of opinion and articulate, and then she's got this kind of moody, slightly, kind of uncomfortable, antisocial, scrawny guy beside her, but she's intrigued.
Yeah.
And she somehow draws out, even when he's kind of a little curt with her, I see her almost like a movie director, or like she just holds the space with him and almost smiles at his barbs, and proves her mettle in a sense, that she's really present and gets him, and maybe finds him so much more fascinating than the much more standardly Greek gods that she might have throwing themselves at her.
Before we run out of time, we have to talk about Timmy and those live performances as well, because they kind of, there's something about, you know, hearing and seeing him in those moments for real. You know, the imperfections that are part of the storytelling, that are part of how you feel by watching those as well. And was there a moment where you kind of, you just knew that not that it was the right decision to make, but you knew that it was just going to give so much more life to the film?
It was when he did it. I mean, it was. I didn't make a global decision to let the whole movie go live. In the first week, we recorded the scene we were discussing where Timmy Bob arrives at Woody Guthrie's hospital bed and sings this song that he's written for Woody for him. And Timothy really wanted, it was probably day 5 or something in the movie, it was the first song we were laying down, and Timothy really wanted to do it live. He had been practicing the song for 4 years. He felt like he could do it. And it caused a slight panic among the technocrats on my movie, you know. What if he's playing a different rhythm from one take to the next? Will it cut? And you know, we can't get the kind of sound we can get in a studio here. This is a noisy hospital. There's traffic outside. And I kind of weathered through all that because I just wanted to get him the chance.
Yeah.
And I told them, you know, if it's corrupt, we'll do a take with the playback if it doesn't work. But what happened was just Timmy sat down and it was just sterling. And it was incredible. And it was incredible because he was better than the recording he had laid down months ago in L.A. But more than that, he was alive. He bent the song. There's a moment in the song where he just decided to hold a note for about 8 bars and keep playing under. He's his own accompaniment. He can do whatever he wants. And he held this one last, the almost near final, about a bar before the end. He holds this chord and just keeps repeating it and repeating it and repeating it and holds the note an ungodly amount of time. And all of this was just a decision he made in that take, which he never could have made if there was an earwig in his ear playing him a kind of pre-record. And that's the moment I think he grabs the audience and you buy in for the whole picture.
That duet with him and Joan as well, Ain't It Me, Babe, is just... That's great. Because the lead into that as well, you know, she flips in the bird, all that. All that is kind of, yeah.
And it's very much that same idea. If there is one repetition or preoccupation I have that runs very constant between Walk the Line and this movie, it is the idea that the stage is this uniquely ironic zone of intimacy where you can be having out a kind of, you know, and you could be having a squabble in your life, it kind of just very subtly while you're doing your job, playing your music. And that in many cases in the Hell's Bells lives they lead, these are the only moments they have alone together, even though they're in front of 10,000 people. And so the idea that this is I love the kind of contradictions. They've been kind of fighting with each other. They had a terrible tour together. She flips him the bird as he comes on, but then she introduces him with admiration, at least openly to the audience. And then she picks a song about basically breaking up or leaving someone, and then from his repertoire, and then they join together. But what instantly happens is just, they may not be good together in life, but they are great together in song. And the song provides a kind of vacuum of all the other bullshit of their problems, and disagreements and disappointments vanish because, I mean, that's the power of music, the power of dance. It becomes something we just do as opposed to thinking. And when we do it, we forget everything else. And you see these two souls that obviously love each other when all the other shit is evaporated.
Yeah. I could talk to you for days about this
Me
film.
as well.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Edith,
an
as
absolute
always.
treat. Thank you so
All
much
right,
and congrats.
let's make it, what would a 4-P?
Hey, 30. I'm going for 30.
That's good. We'll be with walkers getting it done.